Okay, Jim Feig, back to you from South Bridge Street Live, your master photographer, coming with some photo hints for today. This is my photo for today. It's a picture of a knight. I've got two pictures here, a picture of a knight and a picture of a king riding his horse. So let's start out with the picture of the knight. What I'm going to talk about today is taking photographs in an arena, one of these sporting events or a show where you're dealing with a situation where you've got a lot of problems. When you're the challenge the photographer, you're dealing with a situation where the light level is low, and the lighting is hard and unflattering for photography. They're using spotlights and the light to light the performances, but the rest of it is dark, and it's not a very easy situation to have good lighting to photograph in. And then the color of that light is all over the map. You don't know where it is most of the time. You've got to adjust your camera to match the light. And because of the low light level, you're going to be suffering for struggling to get the camera settings you need. You're going to be dealing with a high ISO and a relatively low shutter speed and a wide aperture just to get enough light in your camera for a good exposure. So if there's action in the arena, you might not have the shutter speed you need to stop the action completely. And these are crowded situations where you can't bring a tripod in. Makes it more difficult to get a good sharp image. So a very difficult time for the photographer. It's also hard to get close to the action, and it's a situation where flash is usually not suitable. So those are the problems you're dealing with. Those are the problems you're dealing with, and we have to figure out how to deal with those. So let's talk about this. First of all, the low light and action situation. With this low light that says, I'm going to struggle to get the exposure I need, and I've got action here, so I need a fairly high shutter speed. What do? Well, I'm going to kick my ISO way up on my camera, and that's going to increase the noise in the photograph. And I'm probably going to try to get a fairly large aperture, and that's going to give me a shallower depth of field, so I'm going to have to be more critical on focus. Well, let's see. How do we deal with these noisy photographs? Well, the best equipment for dealing with noise are some of the newer full-framed DSLR cameras. They handle noise better than some of the older cameras. The full frame gives you more to work with. So if you have a nice new full-frame DSLR, you're in about as best shape as you can get. And that says you also have deep pockets. And I don't have deep pockets. So I don't have a nice, brand new, full-frame DSLR. So what did I use here? Well, I had traveled away from home. This is way up in Dallas, and I was visiting my daughter. And I tossed in my bag my old Nikon D5000 and a couple of lenses. And that's all I had with me. Now that's sort of a midway APS camera that's not the entry level, but it's not the upper level either. So it's got its limitations, and it's not real brand new anymore. It was fairly old. But I knew what I could do with that camera. I've used it quite a bit, so I knew my camera, and I felt comfortable that I could get some pictures. And as you can see from the shot of the knight on the board and the shot of the king riding his horse, that we did get some pictures. Okay. Well, what kind of settings did I use on that camera? What lens did I use? What did I go with? Well, for a lens, you might say, well, I'd like a nice telephoto, maybe a 70-200 to reach out and pull some of the subjects in, and it'd be nice if I could put a nice 70-200 f2.8 lens on the front of that camera, and I take care of that low light too. But again, I don't have deep pockets, and that means deep pockets. So what I chose here was sort of an unusual lens for this, but I chose it because of its aperture. I had a 35 millimeter f1.8 prime lens. I put that little lens on the camera. That large aperture was really going to help me in the light. And gee, I was able to get close enough. I got a front row seat. This is a sort of an oval-shaped arena. I got a front row seat, not on the side, but toward the rounding of the oval on the end. It worked well. It was a good seat to do with. And I was able to get some decent shots with that 35 millimeter lens. Now, you say, well, did you have any shooting wide open? Did you have any depth of field problems? Not really with this setup, because the short focal length, that's going to give me a fair depth of field range to start with. That 35 millimeter has much more depth of field to it than that 200 millimeter might. And I've got a decent enough working distance that I'm not so close that I'm challenging my depth of field. So depth of field was not a significant problem here. Set my lens wide open, or pretty close to wide open. I think I was shooting about an f2, which is just about wide open. And set my camera to flash through aperture priority. There's no chance to use a flash here. So I set my camera at aperture priority, my lens at an f2 aperture. I cranked my ISO up to 800. I knew with this little camera I could go to 800 and not get appreciable noise, because I've done it in the past. So I cranked my ISO up to 800 shooting an f2, and I could get a shutter speed of a 1/60th to 1/100th of a second, and that was good enough to hand hold in this situation for all of the shots except maybe some of the action shots that I was facing. But things worked pretty well here, and I got a couple of good shots, as you can see. I like to sneak a monopod into these types of situations sometimes. They're not nearly as clumsy as a tripod. You can, if you're sitting down, you can set the monopod right between your legs and your seat, and you can get quite a bit of camera support that way if you have to use the lower shutter speeds. I didn't have a monopod with me this time, but I've got a nice Manfrotto monopod at home, and I've got a wooden handle with a quick release camera plate on it, and it converts my monopod into a cane very quickly and nicely, and that gets me into situations pretty well sometimes. Okay. The other problem we're dealing with here is the white balance. Your lighting can be all over the map. How do you deal with that? Well, I'll usually try to do some preliminary shooting once I get settled before the event starts, and I'll try fluorescent settings, I'll try incandescent, and I'll try automatic, and I think with this one I ended up using the automatic white balance, and it worked pretty well, so I got some good shots here. If you want, shoot in the raw format if you're happy with that format, and that'll help you adjust the color after the fact a little better, and also make it a little easier to deal with post-processing corrections of the noise. But I think I shot these in JPEG just because I was doing something quickly and I wanted to be able to look at them quickly. Okay, let's talk about post-processing. We're going to take these pictures and we're going to take them into post-processing. What are we going to do? Well, usually I go about a simple way. I'll do cropping. I'll adjust the exposure using the level setting. If I'm going to do any noise reduction, I'll do that. Color adjustment, I might do a little color balancing. If I'm shooting raw, that's pretty easy. It's not as easy if you shot JPEG. And if need be, I'll do a little sharpening. I don't think I did any sharpening on these photos you're looking at today. So, but there's our arena photographs. And sometimes when you're dealing with lighting like this, you get very high contrast. And I will at times especially on the still shots. I'll take 3 different exposures of the shot and experiment with HDR and the post-processing and come up with some interesting looking stuff sometimes. So a lot of opportunities. Think about it. Think your plan out. Decide what camera you're going to use, what lens you're going to use, what settings. Experiment a little bit with the lighting before the action starts, and then go out there and take your photos. You can get some good photos that way. Jim Feig with your photo advice of the day. I'm signing off from South Bridge Street Live. Thank you.